Hi guys and welcome to Dial It Up, and today we are talking about the Justice League Teleporter. Now if this looks familiar to you, it's likely because you've seen it in blue before in the Avengers Roundtable. Now I'm going to be going over this resource. It works identically to the Avengers Roundtable, so if you've seen my tutorial on how to use that, you can skip over this one if you want. This is for my friends that are DC collectors only and only play with DC stuff. This is how you use your new DC resource. So the Justice League Teleporter, breaking it down, starts off with force construction. Justice League Teleporter costs 5 points. Up to 6 distinct ID cards may be attached to this resource by paying their cost. ID cards may not be included on your force in any other way. So, pretty simple. 5 points gets you this. Another 5 points gets you a card. Another 5 points gets you a card. So on and so forth until you have the full one filled up to 35 points. Least amount is 10, full amount is 35, any mix in between there as to how you want to fill this up. Setup. Oh, also, can't have ID cards on their own. If you're going to have the Justice League Teleporter, the only ID cards on your force have to be on the teleporter. No setup. ID cards are attached to the resource starting with ID slot number 1 and filling each slot incrementally. Each ID slot with an attached ID card during force construction is called an active slot, even if the ID card has been removed. So, as I was showing earlier, you're going to start with slot 1, put in a card, slot 2, slot 3, slot 4, however amount you want to fill it up to slot 6. So they do specify that it has to be incrementally. You have to start with slot 1, so you can't have slot 3, 5, 1, 3, and 5 filled up. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then once you have paid for the slot, is considered an active slot. We'll get into why you want to know about active slots in just a little later. So once it has been activated through force construction, you've paid for it, it will be active for the entire game. Clicking the dial. When you remove an ID card from this resource using its call and help ability, you may roll a d6 and turn this resource's dial clockwise that many times. When a friendly character takes damage from an opposing character's attack, after actions resolve this resource's dial, click this resource's dial once, and then turn it a second time if the damage assigned to that character was 3 or more. This resource's dial can't be clicked beyond click 25. So at the beginning, if you take a card off using the call and help ability, you can roll a d6. It's a may, so that is optional. You do not have to roll one. Once you roll the d6, you turn the dial that many times. And then when a friendly character takes damage from an opposing character's attack, click it once. If that damage that was assigned to them is 3 or more, click it twice. Now that is specified through an attack, so this isn't going to go off of like poison. It has to be specifically through an attack, and then it does specify assigned. So if that character was assigned 3 or more, whether they take it fully or not, if they were assigned that 3 or more damage, click twice. And then you can't click beyond click 25. That is the end of the dial. Once you get there, that's going to stop. Scoring. Each time an ID card is removed from this resource, your opponent scores that ID card. The base cost of this resource is scored if no ID cards are attached. This resource and any attached ID cards are scored if all friendly characters have been KO'd. Okay, so there's 3 different situations in scoring here. The first is anytime you use the call and help ability, your opponent's gonna score the 5 points for that card. Even if later on you bring that card back and then use it again, they will score that 5 points again. So with this particular resource, it is possible to rack up a couple of points past the build total. The second part is that if you have used up all of your cards and at the end of the game, your opponent will score for the empty resource. Now this is if your game goes to like time or any other end game condition that is not clearing your force. If it goes to time and you still have ID cards on there, they're not scoring that. But if it goes to time and there's no ID cards on there, they're going to score the base 5 points for the resource itself. And then the final one is if you are completely cleared, they're going to get all your points anyways. Now on to the abilities that this can use. Number 1, I can help right now. You may attach, this is the first trait. I should specify, not number 1. I can help right now. You may use any attached ID cards call and help ability. Pretty simple. If you watched last week's episode where I talked about ID cards and went over how all of that works, that is the call and help ability. You are allowed to use that if you use this resource. Second, I'm better suited for these foes. After revealing your force, but before placing characters in your starting area, you may replace a friendly character on your force with an ID card of equal or less points from your sideline. That character is no longer an ID character, and its ID card is removed from this resource. Okay, so there's a few things to that. The first is the timing of when this happens. So when you sit down across from your opponent, you reveal your force. That is the first thing that you do. So when you're in that phase of revealing your forces, you get to look at your opponent's force and figure out if one of your ID cards would be better suited on your actual force. What you're going to do if that happens, as long as they are the same or less points, swap them out, take that ID character, put him on your force, take the other guy, put him aside. Take the ID character's card off the resource. Now, it does say remove it from this resource. It's not being removed from the call and help ability, which was the way that it scored. So they're not scoring for that 5 points, but that means that that slot is not there for you to be able to use that card. So I just wanted to specify when this happens, because this happens even before you're rolling for initiative as to who's going to take first place. So you're not going to get affected by any other game effects. Specifically thinking of like Copycat, you're not going to have to worry about flip-flopping on that because she doesn't even get a chance to do her thing yet. This is the very first thing that's going to happen when you look at your force and figure out if one of the sideline guys are maybe better suited for that force they're up against. Next trait that they have is call in the Reservist. At the beginning of your turn, if a parachute number is revealed and that ID slot is active and empty, you may place an ID card that was removed because you used its call and help ability into that slot. If you do, turn this resource dial once clockwise. So at the bottom of the dial, you'll see a little parachute, a little dropping package, and every so often in that slot, a number will show up, and that will correspond with the slot on the actual resource. So when that slot shows up at the beginning of your turn, you may place in an ID card that was previously used. So slot number 1 is a little bit harder to activate or reactivate because of how soon it shows up on the dial. But if that shows up at the beginning of the turn or is there at the beginning of the turn, take a card that was already used and put it back. As long as that slot was active, which I mentioned earlier, an active slot is one that you paid for during force construction. A card you've already used, put it back on, and then you are free to use it again. This is how I mentioned earlier in scoring as to why you can go beyond your build total when you are scoring points for this one. The other thing I want to mention on this is the awkward timing on this part of the resource is that the number has to be showing at the beginning of the turn. Now, also because call and help happens at the beginning of the turn, it is possible to call and help, roll the dial, have that number show, and reactivate that slot. Now, a call and help is only a once per turn thing, so you're not going to keep doing that, but it is possible for that combo to happen of bringing in a character, clearing that slot, landing on that number, and then reactivating that slot, because all of that happens at the beginning of your turn. And then we're going to get into the powers that it actually uses, which is going to show up at the top of the dial in those nice gray bubbles. Now, first number 1, that there is lending moral support. At the beginning of your turn, you may choose a friendly character and roll a d6. Until your next turn, that character can use the inspiration of the ID card in that slot. So this is very similar to the power battery, where you were using share a construct and using a construct power. What you're going to do at the beginning of your turn is choose a character on your force, then roll a d6, match it up with the slot, and then you use that inspiration. Now, that character will use that power, that inspiration, that modifier, whatever you're getting from that card, as if an ID character was adjacent to them. So they get that bonus, and only they get that bonus. Nobody around them or anything like that, just that one character you chose. You also have to choose the character before you roll the d6, so you can't roll the d6 and be like, oh, what character would that be good on? Gotta pick the character first, then roll your die. If it happens to roll on a slot that is not active or that you don't have an ID card on, you're out of luck on that. If you roll it, get an ID card, and then use that ID card, you don't have that inspiration anymore because the source of it is gone. It's not on the resource anymore. And then number 2, I can't get there, but I can advise. At the beginning of your turn, you may choose an ID card attached to this resource that you didn't choose last time. Until your next turn, friendly characters can use the inspiration of that card. So as you go further along in the dial, this is going to be kind of the souped up next version of it. You get to the point where the number 2 is showing, and now you get to choose which one of your ID cards. You don't have to rely on the d6 to pick an inspiration. You just choose your character, choose your ID card, that's your inspiration, and go. It only lasts until your next turn, and you can't pick the same inspiration twice in a row. And then number 3, which as we know from the Avengers Roundtable, only shows up on the very last click of this resource, which is click number 25, is the world needs us. At the beginning of your turn, give any number of friendly characters power actions. For each one given, remove an ID card attached to this resource and place its ID character adjacent to that character given the action. This game, that character is no longer an ID character, can't ignore pushing damage, and returns to your sideline when it takes damage. So once you get to that final one, you can start bringing people in. In order to bring them in, you have to give someone on your force a power action. Now, unlike the call and help, it doesn't matter the point value of these people. As long as you can assign them a power action, they're going to drop a new guy into the board. This new guy is placed adjacent to them, and then they're no longer an ID character, so you can't use their ID card for anything to call them in again. They're no longer attached to the resource. And then they can't ignore pushing damage, so once you push them, and once they take damage, they go back to the sideline. Now, unlike when you have a call and help character, if this character is dealt enough damage to be KO'd, you're out of luck. You don't get to score points for them because as soon as they take damage, regardless of how much damage that is and where it puts them on their dial, they are going to go back to the sideline and you can't score for them. Or your opponent can't score for them. The other thing on that is that if you get to a point where these characters are on the board and you can start replacing them through, say, split, merge, morph, however, that replacement, by the rules of replacement characters, you're going to move all of that stuff of this character can't ignore pushing damage, this character go back to sideline when it takes damage. All of those restrictions are going to get moved on to the replacement character because that's just following the replacement character rules. Once we get to the actual resource itself, we now have the DC character cards. We also have Marvel character cards. The resources don't care. You can put whichever universe you want in these. You could take an entire Justice League teleporter and fill it up with Marvel cards. Now, the only other specification on that is that they do have to be distinct cards. I didn't go over that too deeply at the beginning when I was talking about the setup. And even if you have, say, like the shield card, which itself is unique, and aside from the resource, is allowed to have more than one on your force. If you are putting it on the teleporter itself, you can still only have one because the teleporter is looking for distinct cards itself, regardless of what rules are actually on the card. So that was the Justice League teleporter, and if you have any comments, questions, concerns, just let me know down below, and I'll see you guys next time in another episode of Dial It Up.
Married with Clix is brought to you in part by MajesticCCG.com. Check out the new premium site with MajesticCCG.com/Apex-Insiders. Check the link below. Trust me. Trying to remember that from me talking? Not going to help. You'll get awesome articles at $3 a month, with the first month being free, from amazing writers such as Paris Gordon, Easton Brock, Aaron Cantu. I'm even going to be contributing occasionally. And if you're familiar with the Metal Lab, check out some of Mike Payne's articles. So check it out again, majesticccg.com/apex-insiders for your look into the minds of some of the greats.